Let's go to the raid. And before we get to the raid, I always think this is weird, and I want to know what you guys think about it. There's an article the day before the raid about, like, I guess they called Koresh the sinful messiah. It was kind of like a hit job on this cult. And then the day after, we get a raid. What's the deal with that? What is your take on this article coming out? And, like, I guess it was like a local paper, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually basically the ATF themselves, the feds tried to intervene and keep that article from going public
Oh,
because it
funny.
was going to tip off the Branch Davidians, which allegedly is what forced their hand to go through with the raid itself in the
Hmm.
first place. And so that was interesting to me, right? And because of course, you know, you have this Robert Rodriguez, right? This agent who had essentially infiltrated the Branch Davidians and had been living in a house nearby and was very much against and opposed, allegedly opposed to the raid disastrously playing out due to the fact that he knew that they had prior knowledge
Hmm.
and that they would, respond in kind if they were actually targeted and brutally attacked, which unfortunately was effectively taking place. And of course, what you have to understand is that they could have apprehended David Koresh, which I think is a huge point that
Yeah.
always needs to be made in regard to the Branch Davidian story at Waco, because he's the only person listed on the search warrant and arrest warrants, and had obviously they had originally been manipulatively obtained in the first place.
Yeah.
And so then you also have just considering all the opportunities in the world they had to apprehend Koresh. He had even patterned, he specifically had gone out of his way to pattern his jogging routine to conveniently pass in front of the undercover house in an effort to provide them with exactly the opportunity to apprehend him away from the group without having to cause any real, catastrophic results.
That's
But
crazy. Yeah, he went into town, right? He was like routinely going out of the compound, and they could have done something then, but it seems like they didn't want peaceful resolution.
absolutely. Yeah, and you have the federal agents in charge of leading the raid, right? Which when they were later fired as well. I think it was Charles Sarabin and Philip Chajnacki, it's a weird ass name, but
Hmm.
they were essentially kind of like hung out to dry and really kind of really just given the treatments of just retire, and trot off in the sunset of sort of thing, and officials but anyway, it's just crazy to actually realize what's happening in terms of the 75 agents rolling up to Mount Carmel at 9:45 a.m. and jumping out of the cattle cars screaming Showtime because it was called Operation Showtime. And they in no way did they attempt to serve the warrant. They went directly up to the Alaskan Malamutes or something, I think, were the dogs that they had in the kennel in front of the Davidian complex, and they just assassinated the dogs in cold blood. And allegedly, the other feds claimed that this gave them the the plausible reason to begin firing at the house, at the compound itself, was because they had actually overheard the gunfire of the feds assassinating and targeting the dogs in the kennel.
Mm.
But really, I think that was just an after the fact kind of justification of how it played out.
Hmm.
Because again, it's like considered during the litigation process of the trial itself, like what did they lose? They lost a lot of evidence, including the front door of the Branch Davidian complex, which would have, unequivocally proven who fired first.
Right.
And so that alone is a huge problem as far as the official narrative is concerned. But yeah, so you have instantly the initial plan was apparently to be these group of agents would break through the front door, while the other group, obviously you've seen the videos, they would go up these ladders and take ladders and smash through the windows on the second
Hmm.
floor where the women and children were. But yeah, the dog team was the separate group of ATF that were a part of the first few moments of the operation and responsible for the initial shots being fired. But
So they rolled
anyway,
up, shot the dogs first. That was
mhm,
their first thing, to murder the dogs, and then
yep,
it starts from there. So there's just like dead dogs along the border of the front lines
Oh
of
yeah.
this siege for 50 days. What an insane image. I never knew about the dogs aspect.
Oh yeah. They even there was a of course a sort of ceasefire that took place as well because I think the original firefight lasted for about 2 hours. You know, it was over a 2 hour long firefight. And yeah, so you have helicopters swarming the Davidian complex. You have tanks, obviously driving around, fully cap. As far as that was another very interesting aspect of the of serving the warrant, right? Because you had these aggressive techniques of the Bradley fighting vehicles were
Yep.
equipped with ferret rounds and CS
The
gas
same vehicles
grenades.
McVeigh was using over when
Mm,
he was in Desert Storm. So
mm,
that's a
Yeah.
key point in his story is that he brings that up. Is that he came over here to Waco, and so if you don't believe the government agent narrative, you believe he was just a right wing guy. It's like, well, that's going to radicalize you when you go to fight for your country and you come back, and literally the tools of war you use are being
Mm.
used against the people.
yep.
So I don't know. I could see how that could radicalize someone.
Yep. Yep. Oh, we
Oh
love
no, no
making
doubt.
things for war and then outlawing them at war, but it's totally fine to use them on American citizens.
Oh, like CS gas?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. That fits into the story, doesn't it? That's insane. Before we get to that, Austin, I heard you say on your guys' show that Koresh told one of the guys that he had like a prophecy of this happening.
Mm. Yeah.
Do you believe that to be the case that he actually did have a vision of this?
And that's where I'm more likely to I'm more likely to lean into the alternative theory playing out because it's hard for me to imagine. It's just very difficult for me to subscribe to the belief that he had legitimate like some sort of foresight,
Right.
uh yeah, through a spiritual connection like that. It's very difficult for me to imagine that as a reality. Although I will say, man, just listening to David Thibodeau, one of the survivors, who was a member of the group, he was convinced. A lot of these people were seemingly convinced, but
Yeah.
again, it's like I'm very much just interested to know what were the sophisticated techniques that David Koresh could potentially have been capable of utilizing for his own benefit within the context of the group, because I do feel like I mean, they still to this day, you either have survivors who entirely condemn David,
Hmm.
right, and lean into the idea that yes, he did sexually exploit young people within the group itself,
Mhm.
and kind of side with the idea that he was more of a monster than people will kind of like, at least at least people within the framework of like-minded individuals such as ourselves. Like we obviously, it's the ultimate the ultimate takeaway is the injustice that we witnessed. Truly, I think that's what matters most. But we still can't turn a blind eye to the potential reality that David Koresh could have been an evil person,
Oh
and
yeah.
a very manipulative person.
For sure.
And
That's why I
yeah,
started the show by saying like the government's a death cult. There's other death cults, and sometimes they say things are cults and they're not cults, but you know, um, that's what they do. When we talk about the controversies around the siege, and you brought up the CS, Jose brought up the CS gas. Can we run through some of those things that were going on? So you talked about the dogs being shot. Like what were they doing to these people? Because
right.
there's some really depraved things that they were doing in that time
Hmm.
Oh
frame.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
finding what
absolutely.
gunshots and some of or bullet wounds and some of them were purported to be, them trying to leave the fiery areas. But I'll pass off to you, Austin. You
Oh
got this
wow.
better than I do.
Yeah, it's just honestly, man, when he consider first of all, he's trying to Koresh himself is trying to give phone interviews and local news media interviews, obviously, because he's trying to essentially just get the message out of what the plight of the Branch Davidians at the time when the original raid took place. And you had these tactical teams arrive, obviously, because four ATF agents were killed during that original 2 hour firefight,
Hmm.
which that alone, it's very much in the same vein of Ruby Ridge. Like we have blood in the game,
Yeah.
they got one of our own, and they will maximize the sort of the message that they would like to send. And many of the federal agents themselves spoke to that, right? They wanted to
Right.
send a message to the public, that right, any asshole with a bomb kit, like that's what one of the official authorities said, and I believe I even ended my Waco episode with that statement, because he said 5,000 to 1 every officer of the law. That's how they view this. It's a
Yeah.
battle. It's a war waging on within the framework of just the domestic citizenry versus the state. I
Yep.
mean, that's essentially the game being played,
For sure.
and to put it in those terms is fascinating. But anyway, so you have these four ATF agents who are murdered, and then you have, of course, 20 more who had sustained some pretty legitimate injuries. And so the ATF, they continue attacking the house until they ran out of ammunition, like straight out of the scene from Predator. Just could
Right.
you imagine just going
It's
through
insane.
every last bullet, knowing who is in that compound? I mean, I don't know how you could sleep at night, but
Right.
after the ATF withdrew, they attempt to establish contact with Paresh and others inside the house. Keep in mind, the local police chief said, "What's wrong? Why can't you just go up there and talk to him?" That's what he keeps asking me. I mean,
Right.
what are you doing here?
Right.
And you are attempting to provoke a result such as this, and they got what they wanted. It. So anyway, as a result of the deaths of these federal agents, of course, the FBI inserts themselves into the operation,
Hmm.
and Jeff Jamar, I believe, was the site commander. And by the way, he had been the head of the San Antonio field office. And so this is where you get the hostage rescue teams that had been mobilized to the site. And Richard Rogers himself was very much an interesting individual in context to Waco, because he had been criticized for his actions at Ruby Ridge around 6 months prior to Waco.
Man, oh man.
So
Small club.
he would be the one in charge of the tactical teams, later receiving more criticism for overriding the site commander at Waco in the same
Sheesh.
way he did at Ruby Ridge, which is a PATCON technique all day long.
Mm.
And that's why there were even PATCON operatives who had infiltrated the hostage negotiation teams at Ruby Ridge.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
crazy.
It's like you're making me think of the was he a sheriff in Vegas during the shooting that then wound up
Oh,
being part of
yeah.
like the
Yep.
fire
The guy
response
that
in
went to
Hawaii?
Maui. Yeah. What the
The
hell
hell.
is that? I know, man. It feels like, what happens. I was just reading about how during the Atlanta child murders, there was the police chief that was actually brought in during that time to kind of oversee the process
Mhm.
during the litigation and the trial before the patsy was ever, chosen, in my mind, which became Wayne Williams. Well, he had just so happened to be all over the place in every single position where scandals were erupting. You
Mm.
would find him in San Francisco. He was in upstate New York during the process, as far as the Son of Sam murders.
Oh
He
wow.
was in upstate New York, and then he goes straight down to Atlanta just before the eruption of the Atlanta child murders, which have a direct tie-in to the Process Church again. So, and a military intelligence apparatus that is consistently utilizing a drug trafficking operation. But I won't get into
Yeah.
that. It just goes it just goes to show, right,
Yeah.
what you're really dealing with. This is a very well established clandestine network that is, I believe, leveraging public perception for their own benefit at every step.
Hmm.
So, and I think that this perfectly falls in line, because again, what could they achieve, with some sort of press opportunity such as a Waco, a scandal such as Waco? I mean, it's really the sky's the limit.
They attacked the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. They get to sustain this narrative that you're talking about, being like, we're going to go against anyone who's anti-establishment. There's a million reasons that's great for them. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they sort of use the aftermath of Waco as a leverage in passing the Crime Bill Act of '93. Like I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's sort of connected, and with that's Joe Biden and his cronies back then. I think there's some connection between that bill where they're using it as like, we got these bad guys in this country, we got to take them out.
Was
So-
that the one they weren't able to get through, and they got through later in OKC? Because
Oh, I don't
know.
know.
I know there was an anti-terrorism bill that
That's
got
I
passed
think
at
that's another
OKC.
one. The crime bill was in '93, and that's the one where like you see Biden talking about the video goes around a lot about that one is him saying like we got to
Concrete
get the
jungle or
people off.
whatever, or not
Yeah,
concrete
yeah.
jungle, but yeah.
Basically saying like we got to get
Racial
these
jungle.
people
Racial
off the streets for doing crack and stuff. And he's like saying that, but it's like he's talking about his own son. You know, he doesn't realize it yet, perhaps, but it's literally Hunter Biden. But yeah, that's insane. So then we got these 4 ATF guys who are dead. Now it's like a war. The thing that always was very weird to me. I mean, the whole thing's weird to me, but the really weird stuff is like the psychological operations they were doing on the Davidians. So like, let's talk about screaming rabbits.
Oh my God. It is so crazy to actually go through. They were running mind war techniques from straight out of Aquino's Mind War and the Psychology of Victory. They're using Project Monarch techniques. They really sophisticated ever since the Phoenix Project. And, you know, that alone is important, you know, to point out. So I'm glad you brought it up, but also consider that I had mentioned this to Jose the other day that apparently 3 of Bill Clinton's bodyguards during the 92 election campaign were engaged in the Waco operation as officers of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Shut
Did they
up.
all die?
So check this out.
Shut
Not only
up.
that, out of the 4 BATF officers who were killed in the initial raid on Mount Carmel on February 28th, 1993, 3 of them were the very same former Clinton bodyguards.
No.
So that alone, like,
No
how's that
way.
a coincidence? It's a
Yeah.
little bit difficult for me.
That's crazy. No such thing as coincidence, dude.
At this point, it's very difficult for me to actually come to terms with that being possible. As far as just, yeah, I don't know, but here I should get to kind of again the really torture techniques they were utilizing that would become
Yeah, it's like
a part
Guantanamo
of-
Bay, you know? It's like what they're doing.
Abu Ghraib.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's Abu Ghraib. Yeah, it's straight up the
Crazy.
enhanced interrogation techniques that they sophisticated over time, and they were really just testing them out
Yeah.
on a domestic compound
Yep.
of American citizens.
Yep. They're
I
their
mean, that's really what
it's their
happened.
favorite specimen. They hate us. They hate us. They love doing this stuff. Is there audio or video of the rabbits sound?
I think there is.
Yeah, I've actually heard, yes, and also there's a CIA document that surfaced as well that goes to
interesting.
show what they were actually attempting to utilize on the Davidians. It's a DoD intel agencies look at Russian mind control technology.
Great.
And yeah, FBI considered testing on David Koresh. So federal law enforcement
Shocking.
officials considered testing a Russian scientist's acoustic mind control device on cultist David Koresh a few weeks before the fiery conflagration that killed the Branch Davidian leader and more than 70 of his followers in Waco, Texas.
That's insane.
And this
What's even
It's
nuts
so
is they sent back and said we don't need it. They's already mind controlled, so we're good.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Roger that. That's
Those-
so
those
crazy.
That's a
Sorry,
joke. That's a joke, to be clear. Out there.
Maybe, allegedly.
Yeah, maybe that's a joke. I don't know.
Right.
Who's
Exactly.
to say?